Okay, I want to go to Professor Eastman. Professor Eastman, the reason I wanted to come back today, and I appreciate it, was that Alyssa Farah, who people know has done a great job with Jim Jordan as a comms director, Mark Meadows as a comms director. She went to the White House and worked for a couple of years, I think, as deputy, and was comms director at the end, including after Election Day. She came in, I think it was this morning on CNN, and said everything about the post-election, voter fraud, ballot fraud, election fraud, it's all a lie, large cap, all lie, and it was nonsense, and President Trump should resign immediately. I just want to stick to the facts. Is what Alyssa Farr, if you were able to sit down with her, what would you walk her through to try to just show her, not convince her, but to try to show her that it may be many things, but it's certainly not a lie. And the President of the United States, for pursuing this for the Constitution and the American people, it actually did something positive for the nation, not something he should be ashamed of or resign for. So what would you tell her?
Well, that it's clearly not a lie; it's the truth. And I would walk her through three categories of examples. The first one is pending in three different cert petitions before the Supreme Court of the United States right now. I'm sorry, five different cert petitions before the Supreme Court of the United States right now. Acknowledged violations of state election law by non-legislative officials, either at the county level or at the state level in the executive branch, and in Pennsylvania's case, in the judicial branch, clearly altering state election law in the middle of the election, or in Pennsylvania's case, even nearly 3 weeks after the election, they continue to make changes while the heavy Democrat areas were still counting ballots, removing voter identification requirements and certification requirements to help ensure against the risk of fraud in the casting of absentee votes. That's a fact. It's a fact. It's also a fact that under the law, those changes to the law by non-legislatures violated the Constitution. That's a fact as well. The second thing is, as a result of those changes, we have thousands and thousands of ballots that were illegally processed. We have in Georgia a rejection rate of illegal ballots of about 0.34%, when the normal rate historically is anywhere between 3 and 4%. That's a fact. We also have in Georgia that they were putting out mobile polling place locations. That was illegal under state law, and they did it in targeted Democrat areas, illegal under the unconstitutional under the Equal Protection Clause, and it violated also the opportunity for the campaigns to have observers during every part of the election process. Again, illegal under state law. Those are all facts. How many ballots were illegally acquired and harvested as a result of that illegal operation? We don't yet know, but it is a fact the illegality occurred. In Wisconsin, it is a fact that county election officials in Madison, Wisconsin, illegally did a thing called Democracy in the Park. They did it in collaboration with the Biden campaign. These are election officials who's supposed to be the neutral people conducting the election fairly. They're coordinating with the Biden campaign. Joe Biden has a PSA announcement telling people to go harvest their votes at these illegal Democracy in the Park human drop boxes, they called it. Illegal under Wisconsin law half a dozen ways. And there were 17,000 ballots illegally collected in that process. They also got rid of signature verification. They got rid of the witness requirement. All of these provisions in state law are designed to help protect against fraud. There's a provision in Wisconsin law you have to prove voter ID if you're voting absentee, with one single exception: if you're indefinitely confined, invalid in a nursing home, invalid in a nursing home, you don't have to do the ID. Two county clerks directly told all the voters in their county, forget about that. If you just claim indefinitely confined, we'll let you get away with it, and we won't check your voter ID. Again, invalid under state election law, and got rid of a major check against fraud in the conduct of ballots. These are the kind of things we have. We've got. If you look at the Georgia complaint that was filed on December 4th, and a month later still hadn't had a judge assigned. 1,000 pages of allegations of illegal voting that occurred, verified sworn affidavits. That's evidence. And for somebody like her to say that it's a lie is to ignore all of that. Now, the real question is, and on the Wednesday thing, Mayor Giuliani's speech, my speech, the president's speech, talking about these things, talking about the truth, talking about what went on in the election, people are angry, but they're angry at the illegal conduct of the election. That's what incited anything, if there was incitement at all. It wasn't us talking about what actually happened. It cannot be the case that when you talk about the truth of an election, that you're not allowed to do that because 4 hours later, some people that cross the line on violence take that action. I've seen one report that there were nearly 2 million people at that rally, and we have roughly 100 people that crossed the line into the Capitol. That's unfortunate, and it cannot be condoned. And the people that did that ought to be prosecuted for the violation of the law. But we can't remain silent about what we know happened here, and to keep calling it a lie as if it didn't happen is to shuffle something under the rug that's going to deprive us of our ability to have fair elections in the future.
Okay, I want to go and put a pin in Raheem and Maggie and Jack about it only being the comms director at the White House. So, but I want to go to another topic. You see the frustration, and we're talking up here, and people are saying that our institutions have failed us, and that's what the anger comes from. Greg Gutfeld, at the beginning, has said this on Fox, and I think it's very tightly argued, that when people feel, and we can see it in the live chat, when the institutions don't respond, and we understand in the managed decline of the United States, it's the institutions that have had this pressure and they're either breaking or not performing. So let's go back to institutions. In the Supreme Court, of the 5 that you've got filed and trying to get there, they obviously are sending a signal, or am I just slow in the uptake? Aren't they sending a signal because it's now January 8th and you still haven't got an expedited hearing? It's still in the process somewhere, but you really haven't gotten like dates when you're going to go argue these. I don't think that they're telling you, hey, this is a political thing, and you may have evidence and you may have facts, maybe about the Constitution, but you ought to go back to the Pennsylvania legislature and let them clean it up, and go back to Georgia and let them clean it up. We don't want to get involved in it. Am I just being dense here?
No, you're being absolutely right. Look, the Supreme Court had one of these cases before the election. They had the opportunity to address the Pennsylvania violation of law when the Pennsylvania Supreme Court illegally ordered a change in the date when people could return their ballots. The legislature had considered this, had made adjustments to their law to deal with COVID, but one of the things they didn't allow was for you to submit ballots after the election ended. And the Pennsylvania Supreme Court said, we're going to allow you to get those ballots in as long as they're here by Friday, 3 days after the election, and don't and if your postmark is after the election, that's okay as well. We're going to presume that it was actually sent before the election. I mean, the level of illegality here was preposterous, and the Supreme Court was asked to weigh in on that before the election so they could make clear to everybody state election laws must be followed, or we're going to have a problem with this election. They chose to pass on that, and that's unfortunate. One of the other big lies here is this one that you see 60 court decisions have all rejected Trump's claims. That's just not true. Most of those cases have been rejected on very jurisdictional grounds, and in all but a few instances, none of the merits have even been reached. And the jurisdictional grounds, in some cases, they were brought by individual citizens rather than the campaign, people that don't have standing to challenge an election because they don't have a particularized injury. But a dismissal on jurisdictional grounds is not the court looking at the merits and choosing that there was no case there. This is the problem and why people are angry. The institutions that were supposed to look at this, the legislatures that wanted to look at it, and the governors refused to call them into session. The courts that should have looked at it and took a pass. This is what has people angry, because it's clear that the law was violated, and the question is, what are we supposed to do about that?
Yeah, go ahead, Jack.
Professor Eastman, when you say that the law is violated and clearly this is an equal protection issue, is there any cause for a tort on the basis of individual electors against some of these officials, say in counties in Pennsylvania, county clerks, etc.? Because if they violated someone's individual civil rights, it seems that they don't have the protection, correct?
Well, they were allowed to vote, and so then the argument is, well, you allowed people who are not legally eligible to vote, and then diluted my vote. But that dilution is an injury you share across the board with all other voters. And the Supreme Court's precedent on this, it's a body of law I disagree with, but the Supreme Court's precedent on this is you have to have a particularized injury that applies to you in a way different than the just general population. Otherwise, you're just complaining about our law wasn't followed, and the remedy for that is political, to go back to the legislature. So individual voters, unfortunately, don't have the right to bring a court action against these illegal conducts. But the campaigns clearly do, the candidates clearly do, and those are the cases that are pending before the Supreme Court, but still not a word whether they're going to even take the cases to consider.
Okay, let's go back to Professor Eastman. I think his mic is working now. Professor Eastman, I want to know, just in the facts, where does it stand with the courts? Where does it stand with the legislatures? And forget, you got to sort this out for the future in 2022, 24, the here and now, because we keep saying, hey, the future is now. Where does this stand in courts? You said, hey, I got 5 things in front of the Supreme Court. I got things at state courts. I'm all over. We got guys here, there. I'm at state legislatures. Where is the standard fact, and does it mean anything?
Well, the most important thing is it has to be done, because if it's not, we are no longer citizens, we're subjects. We no longer have control of our government. The violations of state law here meant that the legal process was not complied with by people who did it deliberately in order to skew the results of an election. That cannot stand. And whether it's fixed between now and January 20th or fixed beyond that, it has to be fixed, or we no longer govern ourselves. It's that simple. The other thing I want to say, the subpoena's down in Arizona, and we've got similar instances all over if this was such a clean election, then why are people working so hard to resist subpoenas to actually look at the evidence of what happened? I mean, we call that res ipsa loquitur in the law. The thing speaks for itself. If you ran a clean election, then you want people to look at it and say, see, it's clean. If you ran a dirty election, you move heaven and earth to prevent people from having a look at it. And that's the situation we've been in now for 2 months.
But I just want to make sure, in Maricopa County, I think of the 5 supervisors, 4 of them are Republican. In Georgia, all of the, Raffensperger and Sperling, they're all Republicans. So the guys you've been dealing with are not Soros-backed left-wing Democrats, right, or progressive Democrats. They're Republicans. Why have they been so hesitant to work with people to actually get to the facts?
Well, 2 explanations come to mind. One, they're fearful of the violent protests that we saw all summer in Portland and elsewhere, and live threats that if anybody starts questioning the results of this election, there will be protests on that score again. So we saw that as a setup leading up to the election, and I think it cowered some people. The second thing is, look, just because you're a Republican doesn't mean you wanted to see Trump win the election. We've seen a lot of Republicans who were anti-Trump, and I think that and who think
but we don't want these but we don't want these election officials to think anybody should win an election. We want these election officials just to be neutral, regardless of what their political affiliation is. Right? We want them to be just they want them to be people that in these positions to be neutral to make sure the thing's fair and honest. Correct?
That's right, but we know, human nature being what it is, people in office are tending to be partisan sometimes. That's why we have state laws that require in partisan elections that one member from each party be there at the table watching those ballots counted. That was another one of the laws that was violated in a number of these states. The Republican was allowed to be at the entrance of the Philadelphia Convention Center while Democrats were running the count on tables 100 yards away. I mean, that's just not the sign of transparency, and it doesn't lend comfort to people thinking the election was conducted fairly.
Okay, Professor Eastman, how can people? So once again, would you be open to an opportunity if we get set up a meeting with you and Alyssa Farah to walk her through and show her, hey, somehow you might not have seen the memo that was going around the White House, but this was anything but a lie. You may not like all the evidence. You may not agree with some of our ideas about some of the court angles, but it certainly wasn't a lie. Would you be open to sit down with Alyssa if we could set it up and walk her through your facts and your package?
I would be delighted to sit down with her, and quite frankly, if I found out she already knew those facts and just called it a lie anyway, that's defamatory, and maybe we ought to sit down in a different forum.
Wow, Professor Eastman throwing long there. Okay, but you've got these packages of facts that I've seen that you've got there, and you've got these binders, and you have these briefing books. The one went so well with the state legislatures last Saturday. It was pretty amazing. So we'll make sure we'll reach out and try to set that up. Thank you very much. By the way, give us your social media, because I know people want to follow you. You're a big people in our posse.
So I haven't been blocked from Twitter yet, but Dr. John Eastman there, and over on Parler, nobody had taken my name before I got to Parler, so it's just John Eastman there.